three of us, fish chips, peas, I think one of us carry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10p, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost
Our security.
Keir Starmer has just tweeted 15 minutes ago. He says, I know you're angry about immigration. I get it. We will smash the people smuggling gangs at source. Maybe I'll just read it all in his accent, shall I?
There is no return to freedom of movement. We have left the EU. I do not accept that that prevents us working with other police units here, with prosecutors here, to smash the gangs.
Well, I'm sure the smuggling gangs are absolutely quaking in their boots now. Keir Starmer's on their case. Solving this issue, smashing the gangs, is that the impossible dream, Tom?
It really seems beyond him at the minute, I have to say.
We're going to get the evil people smugglers and we're going to smash them and we're going to put them in jail. That will solve the migrant crisis.
Prime Minister Keir Starmer's promise to smash the gangs has resulted in just 5 convictions. Hurrah for operating small boats.
So what he really wants to say is that this policy of smashing the gangs is a total and utter disaster. There isn't a cat in hell's chance that it's going to work. You
It's crap. It's crap. That's what he's basically saying.
I know you're angry about immigration. I get it. Mark my words, I will take back control of our borders. That means cutting migration, ending the use of asylum hotels and ramping up our efforts to stop small boat crossings.
It's like a parallel universe, the real world, as told by the impressive David Bolt, and Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves' fantasy.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good morning. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell, here until 12:30 today. Lots to discuss, including whether we are closer to peace in Ukraine, because Zelensky will be joining Trump in Washington on Monday. He says that's happening after the big meeting last night in Alaska between Trump and Putin. We'll hear about that. We'll hear lots of different views on that and whether that could bring us closer. Of course, it doesn't seem as if we're much closer. We'll hear from both men, some clips of them coming up as well. We'll talk to John Cooper, the Conservative MP for Dumfries and Galloway, about all sorts of things, including that meeting and the suspended Labour councillor who called for protesters' throats to be cut at a rally. He's been found not guilty of encouraging violent disorder. Is that simply the view of a jury trial? We should just accept it, or is it a manifestation of two-tier justice in our society? We'll also talk a little bit about Nicola Sturgeon with John Cooper. She's got a autobiography out this week, lots that she doesn't even talk about, and some that she brushes aside. We'll be on the debate desk with James Nation, the former head of policy at 10 Downing Street, and Matthew Hulbert, the Liberal Democrat activist as well. As I say, we will talk about the defence issues in Ukraine and indeed the Labour-run council ordering a removal of St George's and Union Jack flags. Apparently it's too scared, yes, too scared to take down Palestine flags without police protection. So it's fine to take down the flag of this country, but not fine to take down the flag of a foreign territory for people making a political point. Also, the police chief who says there is no point in arresting shoplifters. We'll talk about that as well. Stay with us here on Talk. Plenty to discuss. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call to get your voice on the air, to make your point and to get your thoughts across. You can also text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, send me a WhatsApp text message, send me a WhatsApp voice note, less than a minute please, otherwise Tech Up Dave gets a bit tetchy up Dave we call him, or of course you can give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss between now and 12:30. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, there's been quite a lot of reaction since that huge meeting, very important summit in Alaska last night where Trump met Putin, and Vladimir Zelensky is going to head to Washington on Monday to discuss ending the killing and the war, as he puts it, with the US President Donald Trump. That's been announced today. Zelensky held a call with Trump. The US leader informed him about the main points of his talk with Vladimir Putin in Alaska. I want to see a couple of quotes now. One about Putin inviting Trump to Moscow.
I believe we had a very productive meeting. There were many, many points that we agreed on, most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones that we haven't quite gotten there, but we've made some headway. So there's no deal until there's a deal. I will call up NATO in a little while. I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate, and I'll, of course, call up President Zelensky and tell him about today's meeting. We had some good meetings over the years, right? Good, productive meetings over the years, and we hope to have that in the future, but let's do the most productive one right now. We're going to stop really 5, 6, 7,000, thousands of people a week from being killed, and President Putin wants to see that as much as I do.
So that's President Trump speaking there. Let's hear what President Putin said.
I believe we had a very productive meeting. There were many, many points that we agreed on, most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones that we haven't quite gotten there, but we've made some headway. So there's no deal until there's a deal. I will call up NATO in a little while. I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate, and I'll, of course, call up President Zelensky and tell him about today's meeting.
Sorry, that was obviously the same clip there. Apologies, probably some gremlins in the system there. I think we can hear a clip now from President Putin.
Again, Mr. President, I'd like to thank you very much, and we'll speak to you very soon and probably see you again very soon. Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I'll get a little heat on that one, but I could see it possibly happening.
Well, there we are. Next time in Moscow. It'll be very interesting to see if that happens. Well, John Cooper is the Conservative MP for Dumfries and Galloway. John, thank you for joining me this morning. Do you think we're any closer to a resolution to what's going on in Ukraine, to the war there, the misery that millions have been through?
I don't think there's any simple solutions here. I think that's fairly obvious. I think, yes, we are potentially a step closer to some kind of deal. At least there's talk going on, which is good. Jaw famously being better than war. I think one of the things that we've got to understand is the way the Americans view this conflict. They see it as a regional conflict. It's more about Europe than it is about them. Their big concern, I think, is China.
Yes, certainly, and that is a very big consideration. Just expand on that point for us a bit, John, in terms of what you think is in their mind in regard to that.
I think, as I say, they see this as a European difficulty. They want NATO and Europe to get together, get this sorted out. If they can convene meetings that help that happen, then I think President Trump was very keen to see an end, as you say, to horrendous scenes and the killing that's going on. I think the Russians alone have lost something like 1 million people, which is absolutely horrendous in the modern era. So I think, yeah, the Americans would dearly like to see this settled in Europe. The difficulty with that is Europe, as ever, is split on these things. The French want to take a lead. NATO are pulling in a slightly different direction. And Britain, obviously, we're heavily involved. We support Ukraine to the hilt. But again, it's difficult for us because we are out with Europe, which is a good thing. We're not tied to European decisions. But it does mean for quite a complicated picture when you want Europe to sort this out.
Of course, Zelensky is heading to Washington on Monday. The pair said that Zelensky and Trump apparently had a long and meaningful chat after Trump's summit with Putin in Alaska last night. I wonder how crucial Zelensky's assent to what was discussed is to all of this. It is his country, after all. He wasn't involved, and whether you think there will be a second meeting, and if there is, what Keir Starmer's role could be in that.
It's a very difficult situation for Zelensky. The Ukrainian constitution is such that he can't agree to surrender territory, and that seems to be one of the things that Trump is driving at, is some sort of deal between Russia and Ukraine where territory is ceded in some way. So he's going into that with one hand tied behind his back. I think Starmer's role in all this, I think Starmer has played things quite well with the Americans. I think he's been quite sensible. He resisted, for instance, the idea of punitive hit back to the Americans over trade sanctions. I think that was the right decision to make. So I think Starmer potentially has got quite a strong hand to play himself here. But let's be honest about this. This, at the end of the day, is going to be between Russia and the Americans. They are the key players here. We are, I'm afraid, reduced to a fairly minor role.
Yes, it is quite a minor role, although those European figures could play a much bigger role, as you say, especially if the war is to continue. I wonder at what point you think Trump says, actually, I've tried, there is no solution to this, that that doesn't involve ceding territory, which Zelensky doesn't want to do, and then perhaps backs off at some point. I mean, do you worry? That's a big hypothetical, of course, but it does seem relatively likely.
It's a big hypothetical, and you're right, it's a really serious danger there, because what could happen is that Trump puts to Zelensky what's been discussed in Alaska. Zelensky says that's not acceptable, and it's not unreasonable at that point to expect that Trump might very well walk away. Interestingly, Trump also seems keen to continue to supply American weapons, although Europe might buy those. So it's an interesting point here that if he could walk away to the extent and say, you sort this out, Europe, however, I will give you the means by which Ukraine could continue the fight. So that would mean that the conflict burns along at a fairly low level. And again, I think that's one of the things that the Americans are very keen to avoid. They do not want to see escalation. They know that Russia is still a dangerous opponent. It's a nuclear-armed country. Putin is not a leader in the normal sense of the words. He is effectively, it's a one-party state, let's be honest. And they see that as a real risk, and they do not want escalation, which drags them in further.
John, very interesting to hear what you're saying there, although your insight I just don't think is nearly as good as what's on Sky News at the moment. I can see the screen in front of me, and it says at the bottom of the screen, Trump, peace agreement seen as best way to end war. I mean, you just don't get that insight on this station. Peace agreement, apparently the best way to end the war. Who'd have thought? John, I want to talk to you about another big story that is exercising a lot of our viewers and listeners. It's about something that people in your party, both the Shadow Justice Secretary and the Shadow Home Secretary, have pointed to as a potential two-tier justice. This is the Labour councillor Ricky Jones. We're just going to remind ourselves what he said on the 7th of August last year. We remember those riots, the upset that many people had post-Southport. This is what Councillor Ricky Jones, Labour councillor, said.
We've got children and women using those trains, destroying some relatives. They are disgusting, nasty bastards, and we need to cut their throats and get rid of them all.
Talking about cutting people's throats, calling them disgusting Nazi fascists. I am not condoning for a second anybody who broke the law during the riots, and they should face the full force of the law, but I also think Ricky Jones should too. Some people will say, look, he did face the full force of the law, he had a trial, there was a jury involved, the jury acquitted him, that's justice. Is it? What do you think, John?
So I'm always very loath to criticise the jury. They sat through all the evidence, but the difficulty here is, and we can all see that video, he talks about cutting people's throats, and he makes a throat-cutting gesture with all the baggage that comes with, and the horrific scenes that we saw when ISIS were doing literally that to people. It's horrendous. And so I wonder if really what this is a failure of is a failure of prosecution. I wonder if the wrong charge was brought, because he was cleared of encouraging violent behaviour. We can all have our own view on that, but I wonder whether or not a lesser charge perhaps, but nonetheless still a significant charge, such as breach of the peace, might have been more relevant, and that talks about putting people in fear and alarm, and those gestures certainly would put people in fear and alarm. And no matter what protest you are on, if you're carrying whatever placards you are, you shouldn't face threats like that. It's absolutely terrifying. And I think it's clear, although he has been acquitted by the jury, I cannot see how this man can continue as a councillor. That's behaviour unfitting of someone in an...
I mean, in fairness to the Labour Party, the next day they suspended him as a councillor. So I think we can all agree that was the right course of action.
Yes, that's right. So that suspension was absolutely the right thing to do. There's no question of that. And I guess they will now review that in light of the jury's verdict. But as I say, I think a person acting like that is incompatible with an elected position.
I agree with that. Do you think that your Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, your colleague, was right to say it was two-tier justice?
I think there's deep concerns about two-tier justice. I think one of the difficulties we've got in this country is that the Lucy Connolly case is inescapable. And again, people will be familiar with that case. That's a woman who was jailed for putting out a tweet. And it was quickly deleted. Now, the tweet was abhorrent, and I don't stand over that. It was horrible too.
I agree with you. Yeah.
It's not the literal threat that we've seen in this case here. And there is again, it's inescapable. Lucy Connolly is married to a Conservative councillor, so you do have to wonder if there is a two-tier justice here. And even the perception of that is damaging. The key thing in justice is that we are all equal in the eyes of the law, and we all face justice equally. And we cannot have any suggestion of a two-tier system. And we need to address that. The government have to get a grip on this.
Final question, John. Nicola Sturgeon's autobiography out this week. I don't know if you've read J.K. Rowling's review of it. It is absolutely excoriating. She does not miss and hit the wall. I wonder whether you will be buying Nicola Sturgeon's autobiography or whether you've read any of the extracts.
So I think the best thing for most people to do is read the J.K. Rowling review. The review is far better, I suspect, than the book. I have not bought the book, and I shall not be buying the book. And critical, I think, to this, it's frankly, it's called, and frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. What she doesn't talk about is more significant than what she does talk about. She talks about lots of... She said that the worst day of her life was being arrested by the police, but she doesn't talk about why she was arrested by the police. She has been subsequently cleared of any wrongdoing, I have to point out, but nonetheless she doesn't talk about the reasons behind that. She said that she should have paused her plans for gender recognition in Scotland, which would have made it much easier for people to identify as whatever sex they wanted. She had plenty of opportunity at the time to pause that. So again, she's dug herself deeper into this hole in this area.
OK, John, thank you very much. John Cooper there, who is a Conservative MP for Dumfries and Galloway. We'll go to the debate desk in a moment. James Nation, the former head of policy to Rishi Sunak in 10 Downing Street, is with us, as is the Liberal Democrat activist Matthew Hulbert. Plenty to discuss here. What do you make of what John Cooper said there? Let us know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. You can send me a voice note on that number as well. Plenty to get your teeth into. And thanks to Bernie, he says, what a farce. Just look at Trump's best mates, Netanyahu and Putin. He loves bullies and oligarchs. Penny in Essex says, good on Trump for trying, but how can he say productive talks when there was no production at all? I've no idea. It was just two world leaders sucking up to each other. I wouldn't go to Russia for the next one, Donald. You may never return, but thank goodness Starmer wasn't invited, says Penny. Bill in Liverpool, all that will happen when the next meeting happens is that Trump will bully Zelensky and embarrass him in front of the press, even though Zelensky will have to put any proposals to a referendum by his people. If you take a look at the body language of them both, you can tell who is happier after the meeting. Putin is making Trump look weak, says Bill in Liverpool. And Graham says Starmer's role will be acting as the Donald's footstool. Lots to discuss. Let us know your thoughts. As I say, 0344 499 1000. The debate desk is coming up next.
but it's the left. The whole concept of being left-wing is that you believe that people are naturally good. So if somebody is naturally outside of that, then there is something wrong with them. And the left can't do the whole person and politics. No. They can't separate it. It's why they can't do the art and artist problem as well. So that, you know, they edit everything by one artist after they've been found guilty of something must never be heard again. They don't really get that separation. But it really is in their pathology. It's halo polishing is a lot of the big problem that we have with the left.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you so much for your company this morning. Of course, you can get your calls and indeed your voice notes in. Tech Up Dave going through some of them already. They are all so far less than a minute, so he's not tetchy up, Dave. We are talking, of course, about Ukraine and indeed that big meeting that happened in Alaska last night. Full coverage, of course, this morning with Russell and with me as well. What do you make of it? Do you think things are better? Are we closer to a deal in Ukraine? Let's have a look at what both men were saying there. First of all, Donald Trump talking about a productive meeting.
We had some good meetings over the years, right? Good productive meetings over the years, and we hope to have that in the future. But let's do the most productive one right now. We're going to stop really 5, 6, 7,000, thousands of people a week from being killed, and President Putin wants to see that as much as I do.
That is Donald Trump there. Also, they talked about a possible follow-up meeting in Moscow.
Again, Mr. President, I'd like to thank you very much, and we'll speak to you very soon and probably see you again very soon. Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I'll get a little heat on that one, but I could see it possibly happening.
Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin there. Well, James Nation OBE is with me. He's former head of policy at Number 10 for Rishi Sunak. Great to have you in the studio,
Thank
James.
you very much, Peter. Good to be with you.
And Matthew Hulbert as well, returning to the debate desk, Liberal Democrat activist. Great to be with you, and health campaigner as well. Interesting, raising the prospect of a meeting in Moscow. If you were advising Donald Trump, James, would you say absolutely not, or alternatively, you must go?
You've got to say, I think, don't fall into the Moscow summit trap. I think, and this is what European allies will surely be saying to the Americans this morning, that the next step has to be a trilateral involving the Ukrainians. Now, obviously, the Russians are going to continue to veto that, but I was slightly nervous coming in this morning because things are moving so quickly. You know, on the face of it, the summit really achieved nothing. I think from Vladimir Putin's remark then, that's clearly someone who felt he won, confident enough to give that rare remark in English. But then now you've got Zelensky going to the White House again on Monday. You've got the classic of the genre with Trump giving comments while on Air Force One and to the press saying, you know, maybe we will do a security guarantee involving the Europeans as well. So we don't quite know where we stand, but please, I think it would be a very bad situation for Ukraine if we were to see the Americans go to Russia for bilateral talks. We need to have all sides around the table, but particularly the Ukrainians, to just try and get a resolution to this awful situation.
What about the British? Because we had that hint, of course, that European leaders, including Keir Starmer, could, in theory, be in the second meeting. First of all, how likely do you think that's going to happen? And secondly, what do you think the role of the UK could or should be?
Well, it does seem like, I think, again, to Keir Starmer and his team's credit, it does seem like the UK has played quite a pivotal role behind the scenes at times. I think in particular, you notice that following on from that awful experience that Zelensky had in the White House earlier this year, I think it was reported at the time that Jonathan Powell and others around the Prime Minister and Keir
the
Starmer
National Security Advisor, Jonathan Powell,
did play quite a role in sort of calming Zelensky down and just improving some of the Ukrainian diplomacy to try and get the Trump administration engaged again. But at this stage, we shouldn't overstate, I think, the influence or the role of the UK or any NATO leaders at this stage. Fundamentally, their role is just, I think, to try and impress upon the Americans the fundamental importance and just the absolute, that it is absolutely right to have the Ukrainians at the table here. I don't know. Let's see what happens. It's all fast moving, but I think the idea that you have a big sort of tete-a-tete with Putin around the table with Starmer, Merz, Macron, German and French leaders respectively, and Zelensky just feels a bit much to me at the moment. I think the priority has just got to be having a Ukrainian role and place at the table for this.
Is there momentum, Matthew Hulbert, do you think? Obviously we've got Zelensky coming to Washington on Monday. Do you feel this is moving in the right direction from what you've heard and seen?
Well, I mean, I broadly agree with James, but I think there should be nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. And so, Trump says it was productive, and he was bound to say that, wasn't he? But what did it produce? I don't know what it produced.
Didn't it sort of have to happen so the next stage happens? Didn't it? Well, wasn't it just something that had to happen? Maybe
it had to happen, but I think, we all know, don't we, that Trump is a transactional president.
So is Putin, though, isn't he?
Well, so is Putin, but that makes me concerned that they're going to make an agreement which is palatable to them both, but which clearly isn't palatable to Ukraine. And we must remember that it was Russia that invaded Ukraine. Russia are the aggressors. And Ukraine has been defending itself. And we can't have a situation where... I know that at some point there has got to be some kind of agreement, clearly. Right. There clearly has, and I agree. But Ukraine need to be at the table being part of that decision-making.
What do you think is reasonable for Ukraine to accept? Because Hillary Clinton, the former Secretary of State, and of course challenger to Trump in 2016, said that if an agreement is signed that doesn't involve Ukraine giving up some land, she will nominate Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize herself.
I'm still with her, by the way. Love Hillary Clinton.
Of course you do.
Of course I do.
Very on brand.
Well, indeed. But yeah, I mean, I think she is broadly right. I mean, Trump apparently covets the Peace Prize, and I'd rather have him coveting a Peace Prize than a War Prize. But I just worry that there are
too many prizes for war.
Indeed. But you know what I mean. But I just worry here. Yeah, I don't think there actually is a War Prize, but you know what I mean. But I just worry that that will lead him to, if Ukraine isn't involved in these talks, to agreeing something that shouldn't be agreed.
But we have to. The one thing I would say. So of course, and I was in government when that terrible invasion happened, and what the Ukrainian people have been through is abhorrent. This does have to come to a close, and we are not in the situation we were, say, in 2022, where maybe Ukraine's advantage on the battlefield was a bit more pronounced or obvious than it is now. I do just, I take the points on Trump, but I do just bristle slightly when Democrat politicians from the US are sort of carping and saying, a deal should only be agreed if it doesn't involve any land swaps. I think, are we seriously saying that if the Harris administration was in charge now in the US, that we would be looking at a situation where Vladimir Putin and the Russians might be amenable to agreeing something with no... We've just got to be realistic.
This is the point, and look, 90% of what Trump says and does I disagree with, but there is a core there, there's a determination, and they're talking about peace. And Matthew says, what did this actually achieve? Well, maybe it didn't achieve anything that tangible, but the fact they're talking, and the fact they're talking about an end to the war, which, a Harris administration would not be, and with the greatest respect, a Sunak administration didn't really talk about. This is progress in itself, Matt.
It is, and I'm really interested to see what comes out of this meeting in Washington on Monday. I mean, I just had a mental image come to me of the Pope's funeral, I think it was, wasn't it, when you saw that striking image
Chapel,
of Trump and Zelensky talking, and the hope was that even in death, the Pope's last great service to the world was that it got those two talking again there, and I very much hope that continues on Monday. I'm just still really uncomfortable I know this might have to happen, I know it probably has to, but I'm just uncomfortable that Ukraine will be asked to give up too much.
So am I. I think I share your discomfort. I think what's the end game? That is the uncomfortable position that all of us are to confront. And Peter, you're right to put the challenge on the table. You know, I worked, you know, for successive governments and saw successive politicians at the top saying Putin must fail. You know, this has to end in unconditional Ukrainian victory. But we find ourselves in a situation where we've often been in history, where sometimes the unpalatable to an extent has to be considered and weighed up. And I think the one bit of hope you can have from this, and it goes to your point, is that Donald Trump's willingness to be sort of unconventional and to try and shake things up a little bit might yield a different process. But we just don't know yet until we know how Monday goes and until we get a sense of how this all might end.
Does Britain have any influence there, or are we a little bit whistling in the wind?
I think we are whistling in the wind to some extent, but I also would say, you know, we have proven, like I was saying earlier, that behind the scenes at the moment, or over the course of this year, there is a role which senior British diplomats can play in being that communicator between the European and the American sides.
And has Lammy played that with his fishing trip with...
Well, look,
the illegal fishing trip.
The fact, I would observe again, the fact that David Lammy, you know, not my cup of tea as a politician, but the fact that he does have that relationship with JD Vance, again, counts for something. The fact that I think you have seen, I would argue, good productive diplomacy between the United Kingdom and the United States, to the Prime Minister's credit, in recent months, has all got to help. But fundamentally, what's this going to come down to? It's going to come down to the willingness and the ability of the Americans to flex their muscles, and fundamentally, your point, the Ukrainians being fully bought into this process, as painful as it might be.
We'll come back to this in just a second. Let me hear your thoughts as well. 0344 499 1000. One person says 90% of what Trump says and does you disagree with. Maybe not 90%, but an example of what he disagrees. Well, tariffs. I don't think tariffs have been a great policy. I certainly don't think they've been any good for the United Kingdom. I don't think they're going to end up being that good for America either. So tariffs is a big part of what he does, and I disagree with him. I think he shouldn't have tariffs. I think there should be as free trade as possible, would be my argument there, and that's a big plank of his policy. We'll talk more about Ukraine and about Russia and indeed about Trump himself in just a minute here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, there's plenty more to discuss in regard to Ukraine. I know there's some people trying to get in touch with us. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Plenty of people getting in touch on Twitter as well. I'll just have a quick look at what you've been saying, and certainly James and Matthew have their opinions too on all of this. And it's really interesting just what the thoughts are as well in regard to Ricky Jones. We'll talk about that in a second because of what he has been saying. And plenty of people saying that the lesson of free speech in regard to Lucy Connolly is the limit of free speech. Neil says about free speech, about its credibility, both of these people were not guilty. In other words, Lucy Connolly should be set free immediately and plied with apologies and compensation as well. It's very interesting, the Ricky Jones case. We'll talk about that now, actually, because Ricky Jones, the Labour councillor, has said some very, very incendiary things on the 7th of August last year. Let's just remind ourselves what he said.
We've got children and women using those trains, destroying the summer holidays. They are disgusting, nasty bastards, and we need to cut all their throats and get rid of them all.
Well, Councillor Ricky Jones was tried for inciting violence. He was found not guilty by a jury. Should we just accept this as simply justice has been done? I personally disagree with it. I don't know about you two, but I personally disagree with it. I think the jury was wrong. I think that he should have been convicted. He talked about cutting people's throats. He was in a very incendiary situation, and many people, including the Shadow Home Secretary, are saying that there has been two-tier justice. Matthew Hulbert, your thoughts on this?
I think what he said was deeply unhelpful, and that is putting it mildly. But I'm afraid, folks, he was found not guilty by a jury of his peers. He went through due process and was cleared, and we have an independent judiciary. And that is kind of the end of the matter, however much we may not like it.
The point is, though, it's not the end of the matter for a lot of people, because many people...
Well, legally it's the end of the matter.
Okay, but for many people, I didn't say legally it wasn't, I'm saying for many people that's not the end of the matter. They're saying that there is two-tier justice in this country, and even if there's a perception of two-tier justice, even if that perception is wrong, that is very dangerous, isn't it, Matthew?
It is dangerous, but what I'd say in regards to Lucy Connolly, and this is my understanding of this, tell me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that she pleaded guilty.
She did.
Well, there's your answer.
Well, it's an answer. It's not the whole answer. The answer is that Lucy Connolly...
And what she said was disgraceful.
And she deleted it, and she apologised, and she shouldn't have said it in the first place. I'm not condoning it for a second. But you have two people who have said very, very similar things. One's in prison and one isn't. You've quite rightly made the point that one pleaded guilty and one pleaded not guilty. James Nation, what's your perception of this?
So look, I have a series of instincts in response to this, because I get that this is a very difficult area. I think the first thing to say is that both Ricky Jones and Lucy Connolly should not have said what they said, respectively. Like, there is just a basic point, and my family would always say this to me growing up: have a word with yourself before you do and say certain things. And I think we've just got to make that common sense point right off the bat. Why are you saying something about, having people's throats slit, and why are you tweeting something about people being burned alive? Just have a word with yourself before you do that. So I think that is it's such an obvious point, but I think it's the first thing to say. The second point for me is, I do note that in this case, the jury came to a decision, and I am, like you, uncomfortable with that decision, because I think he clearly was inciting something, was my read of it, and I felt deeply emotional and uncomfortable watching that footage. But it was a jury trial, as opposed to a judge making a unilateral decision. And so I think we've then got to have a deeper, I don't know how we facilitate this, but a deeper conversation and debate as a society around freedom of speech, and whether we accept or believe that there should be certain limits to that, and in what circumstances.
Well, there are, aren't they? I mean, we all have to live within the law.
Exactly. So I just think, for me, if you're uncomfortable by this verdict, which I was, but you also acknowledge it's a jury trial, which I think is true. And I think, we should just note here that many of the politicians who are saying that they are uncomfortable by the Ricky Jones verdict are also the ones who would defend the right for jury trials to be sustained as a feature of our system. We've then got to find some way, I think, of just having that national conversation around where are some of the boundaries here. Those are my thoughts on it, Peter.
Yeah, OK. All of that, I think, is reasonable. Barry has been in touch on text and says Starmer needs to concentrate on domestic issues at home. If we just pivot slightly back to what we're talking about in regard to Russia and Ukraine, James, I just wonder, how difficult is it for a Prime Minister to balance those things? Because we hear about never hear care, always at different summits, talking about Ukraine, talking about all sorts of things, when actually there's so many domestic troubles at home.
Totally. I think it is a problem for him. So I think you're right. I think while I would simultaneously say I think there have been some diplomatic achievements by Starmer and his team, I don't think you, by and large, get any credit for those as a Prime Minister. I just don't think you do. Remember, I worked for Rishi Sunak. There was the Windsor Framework Agreement with the European Union, slight poll bounce, but negligible. I think aside from maybe what the Falklands did for Thatcher and maybe on the negative side of the ledger what Iraq did for Blair, foreign events do not
he
loom...
still won an election.
Yeah, he did. It's quite, because then they don't loom all that large with the British public, and I think there is a problem here. And there was an article this morning that sort of had some quotes allegedly from people around the government kind of saying, you know, World War III is about to start, the Prime Minister doesn't have time to focus on potholes, he needs someone else to mind the shop. That is very dangerous. That is a very dangerous mentality politically for them to be in. You need to, as Prime Minister, be absolutely involved and all across the priorities of the public. And you can see why the kind of, you know, jet setting, but also these are serious issues on the world stage. And if you happen to be good at it, which it looks like the Prime Minister might be, you can see why those diplomatic agreements, summits, the importance of them appeal. But you've just got to come back to, if you are not sorting out and addressing fundamental domestic issues, there are problems for you.
So how in danger is Keir Starmer? Because, I mean, I hear, from what it's worth, that, you know, he actually loathes politics, and apparently he has said that. Can you be Prime Minister and loathe politics? We can loathe certain things about politics, I do. Some of the rhetoric and some of the discourse I don't like. But can you... Or is it a good thing for the Prime Minister to actually hate the politics and just want to deliver?
I think you've got to be political as Prime Minister. Right. That's the way I'd answer your question. You might dislike certain aspects of, you know, the Westminster Village getting obsessed with certain things, not holding issues in proportion. But you've got to be able to do politics, to get political, to motivate your troops, to be able to make an argument, sell a story. And I think particularly for a Labour Prime Minister, I would argue those in the Labour Party expect there to be a clear narrative. What are we in government for? What are we in government to do? Yeah. Well, and Starmer won't answer that question.
And I don't think that question has been answered by Starmer. I just want to take a call from John in Manchester in regard to the Ukraine situation. John has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. John, you're on with me and with James Nation and Matthew Hulbert. What would you like to say this morning?
Well, I'm quite disappointed most of the time with the whole with the issue that's not necessarily you specifically, but all the presenters across all mainstream media. And nobody appears to know. They either don't know or they're lying about what's actually going on in Ukraine.
So what are we not saying? What do you think is going on then, John?
Well, everybody seems to be talking about this as though there's still a possibility that Ukraine's going to win. Ukraine have lost already. So anything that happens will be down to the winner. They will dictate the terms.
Do you really think Ukraine has lost already when in 3.5 years Russia has only managed to take a fifth of the territory?
This is the nonsense. If you knew anything about what Putin, it's a war of attrition. Yeah? So basically, he waits for the enemy to come in, wipes them out, and moves forward slowly. He's not interested in land. He does not want to take over the Ukraine.
I just don't think that's true, John.
No. He tried to take Kiev immediately.
No, it's all right, you see.
That's a fact.
You become part of the propaganda.
No. This sounds like Russia apologism.
Yeah, I think you might be.
Okay, let John have a say.
Yeah.
John, go ahead.
You see, this is it. I mean, Putin has to join NATO on 2 occasions. But America needs an enemy, so he got knocked back on both occasions, right? His argument was NATO would be redundant. If you let me in, there would be no issues. What is NATO for?
NATO is for keeping Russia down. NATO is for keeping Russia in check and other threats to NATO nations. That's the point of NATO.
You've got this huge Russia propaganda, which has been basically, it's an American thing. This was all about regime change in Russia. By America, they started the war.
John, I just don't think that's true.
John, can I ask you?
Hold on a second. Hold on.
John, can I ask you? Who do you want to win?
At the moment, there's no want that Putin has won this war.
I don't think he has.
Yeah, well, that's all right. You say what you want.
I will do.
The first thing that starts this lot. Does not anybody have any critical thinking in this issue? Why did Bojo suddenly take Russia Today and Sputnik off the air? Oh, it's Russian propaganda. We can only have our own propaganda. We can't have Russian propaganda. You see, this is it. Then that's what woke me up, and I think everybody's singing from the same hymn sheet. Putin is a nasty.
But I don't think that. I mean, Putin is a nasty man.
He is.
He is.
He is.
Do you not think he is, John?
No, not at all.
You don't think?
Are you a Vladimir Putin fan, John?
He is fighting for Russia.
Is he?
Yes.
His country invaded Ukraine. Man, you're ridiculous.
No. If somebody would take the bloody trouble to do some research.
Do you think is he democratically elected, Vladimir Putin? Do you think he? You think he is?
You think he's democratically elected?
Do you think free and fair elections in Russia? Would you say?
Yep.
Okay, John.
That is a Russian apologist. I'm sorry,
John. That's just not true.
Ridiculous.
Let's just hear a final thought from John.
People off by Russian apologists. This is the propaganda.
Well, don't be one then.
Pardon?
Don't sound as if you are a Russian
Let's let
apologist.
John make a final point. John, go ahead.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is basically, this war was started by America using Ukraine. Ukraine was the chalk on the queue, right?
Okay, John, I just don't think that's true, but listen, thanks for your thoughts. Anyway,
apologies to people of Ukraine for that.
He's right in that Russia didn't try to take Kyiv. There was a feint towards Kyiv, but that didn't happen in the same way as, for example, the Donbass was taken.
Look, we have got a stalemate. The thing that I would quibble with, though, is I don't think that was the immediate war aim from Putin. I think there was a genuine attempt to try and take Ukraine out, and if you'd have taken Zelensky out early as well, you could destabilise the regime. What he wants is a client puppet state on the border, but what he also wants is one that he can try and subtly control from the Kremlin as well. And I think, like I said earlier, it is definitely true Ukraine had more of an advantage on the battlefield a few years ago, but ultimately, we are now in a situation where this is a protracted stalemate that has to end in some way. But I just think the idea that this has all gone Vladimir Putin's way, I think really, to my mind, is insulting to the incredible and tragic sacrifice that Ukraine as a nation has made.
I just want to put a point to you from Mary in County Down in Northern Ireland, who says, watching the gleeful, sneering reaction of Democrats and the left in general to the Trump-Putin summit is so tiresome. It doesn't matter what Trump's personal motivation is. He's focused on stopping the killing in Ukraine and Russia and ending the war in Gaza. The scale of death and suffering in both conflicts is terrible. If Trump and his administration can bring parties closer to peace, that is a massive achievement. And can we just let the Trump-Putin effort play out a bit before declaring it a failure? What do you think?
What has he done to stop the war in Gaza?
What has who done, sorry?
Trump.
We're talking about Ukraine.
Well, did she not just mention Gaza?
Yeah, she did.
Well, I'm asking, what has he done to stop the war in Gaza?
What has Trump done to stop the war in Gaza? Well, he's attempting to put pressure on Netanyahu.
Is he?
Yes.
What pressure is he? Is it working?
Well, he said he's the one who can put the pressure on Netanyahu, and Netanyahu will listen. And the point is that he has said on numerous occasions that there is far too much humanitarian suffering in Gaza. That's the President of the United States saying that. That's an important thing.
And maybe because I agree with where you're coming from, but maybe he can do so with Netanyahu to an extent that a Democratic president wouldn't, because he's Republican and he can, his own base, there are already some fractures emerging in terms of views towards Israel on the Republican side. Maybe, look, I accept, proof will be in the outcomes here. But I also think I do agree with the thrust of what your viewer is saying, that, as I said earlier, this is too early and we do just need to wait. And it's unorthodox. It makes us feel uncomfortable seeing Vladimir Putin on that platform earlier. I get it. But let's just see. It needed, arguably, something unorthodox to try and shake this up.
Well, exactly. And unorthodox is something that Trump does. And one thing that I support that Trump does is talking to unorthodox people. And if you don't have a peace process, if you don't have peace talks, I mean, I know what it's like to come from somewhere where if there's a vacuum, if people aren't talking, problems emerge. And for example, I do think if Obama, for example, had spoken to the North Korean leader, for example, there would be many more people saying that he had done a good thing rather than simply writing off what Trump did in his first term. I want to talk to David in North Wales. I think he has volunteered in Ukraine. David, in what capacity were you volunteering in Ukraine?
We started off a couple of years ago at the beginning. We were taking vehicles over 4x4s. And then we sort of got to know the people in that, and the people are the most amazing people. And we used to go down to places like Zaporizhia,
Well done, you.
Dnipro. We used to go right down to the front and everything.
So when you see what's happening now in Alaska, what are your thoughts on that, David?
Well, there's a couple of things. I mean, everybody's talking about, Trump seems to be doing what is best for America and everything. But don't forget, we're in Europe, and
he is the president of America. I mean, surely that's what he should be doing.
Yeah, I'm sure. But what happens in one part of the world now, the butterfly effect and all that type of stuff. And when you think about the consequences, first of all, if Ukraine falls, it doesn't say much about the strength of the West in that, because it means that he can just go into Moldova, he can go into all the other countries and that, and we'll just sit around and do nothing.
I mean, I don't think there's any evidence that Putin is going to do that. I don't think there's any evidence that, I mean, there's been so much hysterical nonsense about the fact that Putin is somehow going to take over all of Western Europe. There's been no evidence to suggest that, David.
Well, you go talk to sort of the surrounding countries and everything.
But he hasn't done it.
But he just wants a greater Russia, though, doesn't he? I mean, that is why
he can want something. He hasn't done anything to that end, and he's only taken over a fifth of Ukraine. If he wanted to take over all of Ukraine, he would have done it. And if he wanted to take over Western Europe, he would have done it. The fact is, he hasn't done it. And there are so many people saying, "Oh, it's an attack on Ukraine. It's an attack on all of us." It's not.
But then again, nobody thought he was going to invade Ukraine, because he signed the Budapest memorandum, as did the Americans, and Britain is the only one.
Remember,
hold that thought, David.
There's quite an interesting point there, though, because remember, what sets Ukraine apart is that they didn't have nuclear weapons and they did not have any form of a security guarantee or NATO protection. And let me just, because I think we should just engage with this again, because I'm not here to put the Trump administration's points for them, but I would just say one feature that we have seen, I think, as an impact, actually probably as a result of whoever would be US president, because of the way American opinion is shifting, is we are seeing Germany rearm and spend money on defence at an extraordinary level that I don't think we would have thought would happen necessarily anytime soon. Thing? Look, you never like to see it, I think, in general, in terms of massive expenditure on defence at the expense of other priorities. But I think it's a necessary thing.
Okay.
I think it's a necessary thing for deterrence, and I think because of the extent to which Europe is rearming, the posture of the Baltic states, I do think Vladimir Putin would think twice, and I do think it is a good thing that European countries have been pushed to make more of a contribution.
Just a final thought briefly from you, Matthew.
I agree, and I just think, these are difficult and dangerous times that we're living in. I do disagree with you, Peter. I think that an attack on Ukraine, in a moral sense, is an attack on kind of, the Western order and on Europe, and I do think that we should see it as that. Now, should we be getting actually kind of physically involved more than we are? No, I don't think we should. But I do think it's an attack on all of us in a moral sense. Okay,
we'll talk more about this and about other issues as well, including whether arresting shoplifters makes sense, whether it's even something that should be done. Thanks to David for his call from North Wales. You can get yours in on 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here.
actually in recession, not a major one. We're not going forward. Nothing's getting better. Nothing's getting sort of drastically worse. It's just slowly worse. That's what's sort of very painful about all of this. There's all sorts of potential for Britain to be a major military power or a major diplomatic power if it wants to be, as much as anything else. It just seems to be that our political class has decided to stand still and wring its hands, and that's ultimately what is so frustrating. We're not yet in free fall. It could be averted, the crisis that's coming.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, James Nation and Matthew Hulbert are still with me on the debate desk. Let's hear a voice note from Judy.
Good morning, it's Judy from Altos, West Yorkshire. Everybody seems to be criticising Donald Trump in these negotiations. But just think of one thing. If it had been Keir Starmer that were dealing with Putin, it'd have given him everything he wanted and 100 billion to carry on with. So that's the difference. Thank you.
Thanks, Judy. I think I probably agree with you. Leslie's been in touch on text as well and says, "Hi, Peter. Ask Matthew Hulbert, where is your leader? Could Ed Davey get off his skateboard to find some time to comment?" Matthew.
Look, I am critical of my party that it's not as high profile as it should be, and I've used your good programme on your wonderful station here as an example of why I don't know why, for the heavens of me, why they're turning down interviews.
I ask Lib Dems on all the time and they always say no one's available. Another point from Ben in Belfast, who says to Matthew, "Trump has sent his envoys to try to achieve a lasting ceasefire in Gaza. He has put pressure on Netanyahu."
Okay. I hope he succeeds.
Okay. I want to talk about Barbie. A screening of Barbie has been cancelled after Muslim youths complained of homosexuality. Homosexuality in Barbie? What? Threats from young Muslims have forced a Paris suburb to cancel an open-air screening of the Barbie movie, prompting prosecutors to open an inquiry. This has fueled a debate about how fundamentalists among the country's population of 6 million Muslims are seeking to impose their vision of society on the French way of life. James Nation.
You've got to be robust about this. The screening should go ahead and the French police should help it go ahead. Extremism has just got to be combated wherever it exists, and you see here the French culture minister himself a Muslim saying there's got to be a robust posture just wherever there is extremism that is fundamentally interfering and disrupting core values. I'm afraid it needs a robust response.
Have you seen the Barbie movie, James?
I have not, but I would. I have listened to the soundtrack, Peter, and having I'm Just Ken in my head when I knew we were going to turn to this topic was quite challenging.
Matthew, your thoughts on this?
Well, I don't want to be kind of a stereotypical gay man, but I absolutely loved Barbie. It's fantastic. And wasn't it Ryan Gosling?
It was indeed.
Oh, so dreamy. But anyway, sorry,
that's all right.
Left the planet there for a moment. But no, I absolutely agree with James that this is completely unacceptable. France is supposed to be a Western liberal democracy, and they shouldn't be pandering to people with such disgraceful views. They can think what they want, as I always say. We're not the thought police. But when they're trying to demand that films like this aren't shown, that's a step too far.
But we've seen on numerous occasions, we're going to talk a little bit later on actually about Birmingham Council saying it's not taking down Palestine flags because they're afraid, for example. Like that, it's here in this country as well.
Yeah, and I've seen people say, perhaps not unreasonably, that Birmingham City Council should be concentrating more on making sure that the bins are collected. It's where the parameters of free speech are, and I always say that, and I know people say, "Oh, you're a liberal, surely you believe in free speech." Well, yes, but within parameters. We all have to live within parameters. There's certain things we can't say on this station without legal consequence, and so I'm afraid I'm not a free speech absolutist, and these are all judgments to make.
Let's just have a return to common sense. Just seriously, like, people's intuitions here, I still believe in that. It tells us everything you were just saying, Peter. Like, why have we got the focus, the fixation on flags when bread and butter, economy issues, local government issues in Birmingham, you know, it's not been great at all for Birmingham residents. Let's have a focus on fixing those. I just worry that when we lose sight of all of this, what it does is it empowers the extremes, our debates get very shouty, and we just lose all perspective.
Yeah.
You've got to be robust about these things.
And when I left journalism in Northern Ireland, I thought I wouldn't have to talk about flags ever again. How wrong I was.
Indeed, there we are.
Thank you both very much indeed, Matthew Hulbert, the Liberal Democrat activist, and the former head of policy at Number 10 for Rishi Sunak, James Nation. Appreciate you both. Sorry, James Nation, OBE, to give you your full... Your full
please don't. It will go to my head.
I know you always stand on ceremony, James. You're someone who cares about these things an awful lot. Appreciate you both coming in on the debate desk. Plenty more to discuss here on Talk. Let me know your thoughts. We'll talk more about Ukraine and those talks in Alaska in a minute. Simon Diggins, my favourite defence analyst, is coming up. Let me know your thoughts too. 0344 499 1000.
World.
We will smash.
How much, ladies and gentlemen, are fish and chips where you come from? We'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish, chips and peas, £7.50. It's the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips in Leeds, it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us curry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12 and 60 pence. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks ago.
How much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, it's just gone 11 o'clock. I'm Peter Cardwell. This is Talk. Thank you so much for your company. I'm here until 12:30 today, and there's plenty to talk about, including what has happened in Alaska. John's call as well in support of Vladimir Putin is something a lot of people have been reacting to as well. I'll read out some of your messages in a moment, and if you want to ring in about it, by all means do so. 0344 499 1000. We'll also talk about the police chief who says arresting shoplifters is not worth it. There is no point in doing that. What do you think about that? As I said, the number 0344 499 1000. You can send me a voice note, you can give me a ring, you can send me a WhatsApp text message on that number, or you can text me the usual way with usual text message on 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. Loads of ways of getting in touch and lots to talk about this morning, so stay with us here on Talk. Yule in Ballymena has said, so much for free speech. A caller is shouted down and called a Russian apologist. So disappointing. Well, Yule, I did give John a chance to make his points. We engaged with him. Yes, there were three of us and one of him, but I think he did say what he wanted to say. And if John wants to ring back again on a future occasion, he's more than welcome on this station. Thank you to Pete in Redcar, who says Putin must have laughed all the way to Moscow. Don in Chelmsford, I am in total agreement with you when you disagree with the suggestion that Putin will invade other countries. I don't think Putin has the military and financial capability to open more fronts, says Don. Patricia says, I agree with your caller John. Ukraine denied these East pro-Russian regions independence for years after a succession of elections. All Russia did was recognise those elections and welcome them back. Richard in Leicester says, why do you keep patronising callers like John? Pure propaganda by media trial. John was right about Russia today. I haven't said for a second that John was wrong about absolutely everything, and indeed I've agreed with him on a couple of points, but certainly my two debate desk members didn't agree with him. And they're, John is entitled to his opinion as much as they are as well. Sean in Bridlington says Ukraine-Russia isn't a complicated situation at all. Russia is 100% in the wrong. Ukraine is a victim of unacceptable and illegal aggression. Well, let's find out what our two next guests thinks. Colonel Simon Diggins and Putin's number one foreign enemy, Bill Browder, will be with us in a second. But first, I just want to remind ourselves what the two men at the centre of all this, President Trump and Putin, have been saying. Let's hear from President Trump first after what happened in Alaska last night.
Again, Mr. President, I'd like to thank you very much, and we'll speak to you very soon and probably see you again very soon. Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I'll get a little heat on that one, but I could see it possibly happening.
Should he go to Russia? That's something I'll put to Simon and Bill in a second. But let's just hear a little bit more from what President Trump was saying.
We had some good meetings over the years, right? Good, productive meetings over the years, and we hope to have that in the future. But let's do the most productive one right now. We're going to stop really 5, 6, 7,000, thousands of people a week from being killed, and President Putin wants to see that as much as I do.
That was President Trump there speaking last night in Alaska. Well, let's speak now to Colonel Simon Diggins, former senior military officer in the UK Army, of course, and analyst of all things military and defence. And Bill Browder is with us as well. Bill is known as Putin's number one foreign enemy. He's also someone who is head of the Global Majinsky Justice Campaign. Let's speak to Simon first. Simon, progress, do you think? Progress simply that they were talking, or progress towards the end of a war? What do you think?
Peter can win to you. I think there's a bit of both. I mean, I think certainly from Putin's perspective, the fact that the meeting took place, the fact that he's been sort of being brought in from the cold is important to him. So he will see that as important. I mean, from the meeting, we know that President Trump has spoken to President Zelensky and to European leaders, and they're now going to be a follow-up meeting on Mondays. So it looks like something could be moving very slowly. I also understand that this morning President Trump put out on his Truth Social network that they're moving towards a peace deal, not simply a ceasefire deal. I think the expectation, I think I probably said it last week on your show, the expectation was ceasefire first, part of our peace deal, but he appears to be moving further than that from there. And there's a meeting ongoing at the moment with European leaders talking about what that might mean. So things could be moving quite fast in terms of where they are. It won't necessarily be comfortable. It won't necessarily be very easy for President Zelensky, but I think certainly from the perspective of the US and President Trump particularly, he thinks he's got, or he seems to think he's got, something like the lineaments of a deal that he can put sensibly to President Zelensky. So I doubt it'll be very comfortable for Ukraine and for President Zelensky, but I think there is some moving forward in terms of progress. I'm sure President Putin will be delighted with what he's got as well.
Bill Browder, what do you make of this? Should Trump see this as a sign of progress? Should the West and Zelensky see this as a sign of progress?
Not at all. There's no progress here.
There's no progress, even though the two men are talking. That's not progress.
Absolutely not. Putin went there for one simple reason: to try to keep Trump off his back, to try to help Trump save face. Trump has made, I think now, 6 ultimatums for Putin to cease fire and stop the war. Putin refused to do that. This meeting was in some way, I guess, a Putin gesture to try to get the heat off of Trump. But The basic principle is Putin is singularly responsible for invading Ukraine. He's the one who has every ability at any point to stop the invasion. At every point he's been pressured by the United States and other allies to stop. He has refused. And this was supposed to be a big moment of truth where Trump was going to, and he even said so before, that he was going to impose maximum pressure if Putin didn't agree a ceasefire. A ceasefire wasn't agreed, and maximum pressure hasn't been applied.
So what is the answer here then? Would you just not talk to Putin and just try to completely defeat him militarily? I mean, that hasn't worked over a 3.5-year period. Surely another strategy in talking about peace is the best option, Bill.
Well, that would be true if Putin wasn't the one who was basically declaring absolute maximal ambitions in this whole story. He has shown since the beginning not a single inch of compromise. Never since the start of this whole thing.
He's talking about compromise, though.
No, he's not. There's not been a word of compromise in any of his suggestions.
Surely the fact that he is having a discussion with Donald Trump is a move towards compromise.
Not at all. This is a move towards reducing his international isolation. Compromise is to say, okay, I will stop firing. Compromise is to say, I will stop killing civilians. Compromise is to say that I will withdraw from certain territory. He's not made any statement of that sort, and if you can read every single word he has said, there's never been a moment or an inch of compromise coming from Vladimir Putin. And so the way you deal with a guy like this, and I've been personally in conflict with him, is with a boot on the throat. The only thing that he understands is when he's forced to compromise. And
surely if he was forced, surely the point of the last 3.5 years has been an attempt to force him to compromises, or at least an attempt at military victory, which hasn't worked. Therefore, this is a new and different strategy, which may bring peace to the people in Ukraine, Bill.
That's just simply not true. What we've done over the last 3.5 years is given the Ukrainians enough weapons so that they don't lose, but we've not given them enough weapons so they win. And moreover, we've given them restrictions on the use of their weapons so they can only use them inside their own territory. They're not allowed by the United States, by Germany, and by others to strike military targets inside of Russia using our weapons. We also have one huge, huge economic loophole, which is oil. Russia supports their entire war by selling hundreds of billions of dollars of oil. And we've stopped buying their oil, but the Chinese, the Indians, and the Turks buy their oil. There's a piece of legislation which has been proposed by Donald Trump's ally, Lindsey Graham, and Senator Blumenthal, which would impose 500% tariffs on countries that buy Russian oil. It's got 84 Senate co-sponsors. If that piece of legislation were to pass, India, China, and Turkey would stop buying Russian oil. Russia would no longer have hundreds of billions of dollars to fund their war. And within 6 months, Putin would be begging to do a military compromise, a ceasefire, a negotiation. Putin feels like he's winning right now. He feels like he's got the upper hand.
In what way is he winning? He has had 3.5 years. He has only taken a fifth of Ukraine. He has not taken the whole country. He is not a threat, I would argue, to the rest of the West because he hasn't even taken all of Ukraine. In what way is he winning? He's forced to come to these talks. In what way is he winning, Bill?
He feels like he's winning because...
He may feel that way, but I don't think he is.
Well, you may not think he is, but he feels like he is for one simple reason. He doesn't care about his losses. He can lose 1,000, 1,500 men a day, and it doesn't mean anything to him. He's a dictator. There's no public opinion he has to worry about. Whereas on our side, we've got these terrible problems. Donald Trump has basically stopped funding military aid for Ukraine. There's all sorts of talk in different countries about reducing the amount of money spent on Ukraine. There's Hungary and Slovakia that are now fully on Russia's side within the European Union. Putin understands that in a war of attrition, he just doesn't care the economic cost or the personnel cost, the people who are dying. Whereas we care very profoundly because we live in democracies where one leader changes to the next and we change policies. And so that's how Putin operates.
Okay, Bill Browder, thank you very much. Bill Browder there calls himself Putin's #1 foreign enemy. He's head of the Global Magnitsky Justice Campaign. Simon Diggins is still with me. Simon, I think that analysis from Bill Browder, as I intimated to him, is far too pessimistic. What do you think?
Well, I mean, in terms of how the West supported Ukraine, actually, I'd agree with Bill. It's been often been, $1 too little, one day too late. So I think there's a lot of truth in what he says. But I think there is still the possibility of some kind of deal. But as I said, and I accept it, it will be ugly. I mean, the three things that really count here, and this analysis came from the Finns about how they dealt with the Soviet Union in 1940. They looked at their sovereignty, they looked at their independence, and looked at their territory, and without wishing to in any way wish away what is constitutionally legally Ukraine's right. The territory bit is the bit that there may be some degree of compromise on in exchange for independence and for sovereignty. It's not pretty, it's not ugly, and some people will argue, no doubt Bill would argue, this is rewarding Putin for his aggression, and I absolutely get all that. But to say there is no possibility of peace there, I'm not so pessimistic as he is. The issue on the oil is also very interesting, because other indications suggest, regardless of what happens on the oil supplies coming in, that Putin's economy is under pressure. It's not immediate pressure, and that's absolutely true, but Putin's economy is under pressure. It's now basically a war economy, and there's a limit to how far he can push that war economy. So there is elements of pressure on them. They're not as strong as they would like, and I don't like what President Trump did right at the beginning of the year in terms of handing off, if you like, the two key prizes, membership of NATO and the stationing of troops there. That didn't help anybody whatsoever. But I think there's still an element of compromise there, and there's a huge requirement for a peace in Ukraine. We've still got 100 people being killed and injured on a regular basis. Their economy is in tatters, and stopping killing is not an ignoble thing to aim for. And I think that's one of I'm not a great fan of President Trump either, but I think that he's absolutely clear on. War has a purpose sometimes, but also it brings with it a huge amount of destruction. And some kind of way to stop the fighting, stop the killing in Ukraine may be worth the candle. I said it will not be pretty. It will not satisfy those who want to be as pro-Ukraine as I want to be morally and ethically, but actually may be a reasonable compromise given the horrible and difficult circumstances everyone's in.
Should Zelensky attend the second meeting if it goes ahead, do you think?
Well, he should certainly go and talk to President Trump on Monday.
Yeah, in Washington, yeah.
Yeah, much more positively. We heard that very soon after the meeting between President Trump and President Putin, that President Trump phoned President Zelensky and gave him a sort of down brief on what had happened. He then spoke to the European leaders. So we've actually established, again, a reasonable level of communications between President Zelensky and President Trump after the disastrous White House episode at the beginning of the year. So there is at least communications running between the things. And the fact that President Zelensky is going to Washington on Monday means that at least he can see the glimmer of something which might be satisfactory from the perspective of Ukraine. I mean, absolutely get all the strictures on how complicated it can be and how much pride and everything might have to be swallowed. But the fact he's going at all tells me there is something which is worth listening to, and I hope that turns out to be the case. What should
Starmer and other European leaders do? Simply sit back, let it play out, and play a supporting role where they can, or is there more they can do?
Well, the first thing they need to do is be absolutely clear. And I did hear the MOD this morning have indicated that in the event of British troops going to support the security arrangement, that can be done in a matter of days. That's what I want to hear about. I want to hear about Britain, I want to hear about France, I want to hear about Germany, all those other countries who said they'd support the sustained peace and if you like, the security of Ukraine after a peace deal going there. We know already that Putin regards it as a provocation, but that's a standard Moscow line. And here again, Bill is absolutely right. I mean, they have always this kind of maximalist position when they're talking publicly, but they often will deal more privately. Yeah. We should ignore that. We should be absolutely sort of front and centre in terms of supporting Ukraine. We have been in terms of arms, ammunition and training. We now need to be part of that package as we go forward and provide security to Ukraine in the post-ceasefire or post-peace settlement world as well.
Simon, as always, thank you. Simon Diggins there, defence analyst and former colonel, of course, in the UK Army. Plenty to discuss. On all of this, we'll get your calls, texts, tweets, and you can send me a voice note as well if you want to on 0344 499 1000. We'll get your thoughts on all of this next here on Talk.
actually in recession, not a major one. We're not going forward. Nothing's getting better. Nothing's getting sort of drastically worse. It's just slowly worse. That's what's sort of very painful about all of this. There's all sorts of potential for Britain to be a major military power or a major diplomatic power if it wants to be. As much as anything else, it just seems to be that our political class has decided to stand still and wring its hands. And that's ultimately what is so frustrating. We're not yet in free fall. It could be averted, the crisis that's coming.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to the texter who says, I'm afraid it's time for Ukraine to be pragmatic. They cannot keep fighting this war on the back of UK, US and the rest taxpayers. Enough is enough. It's just a money pit and not their money. They can't win. To say they can is ridiculous. Les in Cheshire says, morning Peter, great show as usual. If Trump was president during the Second World War, would he be doing the same thing with Hitler and carving up Europe and Great Britain for peace? When you start negotiating with war criminals, you're no better than a criminal yourself. I hope you see my point. And thank you to the texter as well. He says Starmer cares more about his beloved Zelensky than UK citizens as well. So plenty of different views on all sorts of issues. Plenty on Twitter as well. You can tweet me at talkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell. Thank you to Fidelma. He says, very disappointed in your guest selection on the debate desk today, both establishment stooges. Philip says one of his guests debating Ukraine is the only one talking sense. No evidence at all that Putin wants to do anything other than protect his borders, says Philip. A cricket scorer says, I'm tired of media and advisors speaking about Trump as an idiot. For an idiot, he's got elected twice. Easy to criticise, but at least he prefers peace to war and he believes in borders and protecting the USA. I would prefer a Prime Minister with those values, says cricket scorer. And actually, Trump isn't an idiot. He's unconventional. He does things in a way that many people perhaps wouldn't do, but that doesn't mean he's an idiot. And clearly he has great appeal. So I've never ever thought that. Another person says Starmer said no one involved in the Southport riots would get bail, but then Ricky Jones did. This is the two-tier issue, says London oil trader. Ricky Jones, of course, wasn't involved in the riots himself. He was on the other side of that, he would argue. But actually, he did get bail, and certainly that trial took about a year, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on as well. Let me know your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000. And Lady Gaza says the CPS should have charged Ricky Jones with a lesser charge such as public disorder instead of incitement, which is very hard to prove. At least then he would have received a non-custodial punishment. Mary in County Down says Browder is so strident. This is perhaps understandable given his experience, but it is nonetheless hard to listen to. Amanda is in Manchester and has some thoughts on this. Amanda, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hello, Peter.
Hi there.
I've spoken to you before.
It's good to talk to you. Good to talk to you again, yeah.
Yeah. I don't think this is ever going to be resolved.
Do you think they can move towards resolving it, though? Do you think that maybe talking is better than dropping bombs, although they're doing that too?
I think it's propaganda.
What's propaganda, do you think, Amanda?
So, if you think about Northern Ireland, when I was at school, I studied literature with Kevin and Stacey.
Right, okay, yes.
No, Kevin and... You know which one I mean.
I think I know the one you're talking about. I've heard it referenced before. Yeah, okay. But why I'm interested in why you think...
It was about two people that went out from different states in this area.
Yeah.
And they eventually solved it. But I just think that we're putting all this money into it, taxpayers.
Yes.
And Britain's in chaos. We've got immigrants living in hotels near where I live.
Mm-hmm.
They're raping children. And I'm not afraid to say it. If you want to phone the police and arrest me, I don't care, because I've had enough of it, basically.
Well, Amanda, there are loads of people in your position who have migrants near them. They may or may not be raping children, but there's certainly many people feel really, really uncomfortable about that and feel that it's unfair as well, and that money should be spent here in this country sorting that out rather than in Ukraine.
Home. Charity starts at home.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, today is the day when the Japanese and the English people resolved the war.
Yeah.
So why are we fighting other people's wars?
It's a very fair point, Amanda, and thank you for it. Certainly yesterday was, of course, 80 years after victory in Japan. We reflected that yesterday, and those heroes allowed us to have free speech and stations like this where we can agree, disagree with one another, where I can read out messages critical of various people, where we can criticise our government. It's a great thing to have. It's one of the fundamental freedoms, and we've got to fight to keep it there and keep it and hold it very dear. Alan is in Salford. He's given me a ring as well on 0344 499 1000. Alan, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hello, good morning, Peter, again.
Morning, hiya.
Yeah, I think, I'm afraid, I like Trump with his home policies. He's got rid of all the illegals, he's getting the economy going. But on the international scheme of things, I think he's letting himself down and letting America down. Putin's just laughing at this.
Why is he letting America down on the international stage? Why is talking to Putin perhaps the wrong option, do you think?
Well, would you have talked to Adolf Hitler years ago when he invaded Poland?
It's not quite the same, though, is it?
Would we have talked to Adolf Hitler? No, I don't think we would.
Well, we did, and we tried to get peace, and Neville Chamberlain did that. It was called appeasement.
As soon as he invaded Poland, we stopped talking, didn't we? So,
yeah.
That's the truth in the matter.
So, but it's not the same example, though, is it? It's not the same example.
Well, he's a dictator and he's overtook a country. Well, this man Putin's a monster and he should never be able to get away with it. But Ukraine are fighting with their hands behind the back because they're not allowed to send their long-range missiles into Russia. They've been told, you can have such and such a thing, fighting with one arm behind the back. And I feel for the country, you know what I mean? But the whole thing now, people are talking about, our money we're spending for Ukraine. God blimey. Someone's got to stand up to this guy.
Okay. Listen, thanks for your thoughts there, Alan. Appreciate it. That was Alan in Salford there. Quite a few voice notes coming into the programme. You can, of course, send yours in via WhatsApp, 0344 499 1000. This one from Mark.
Hiya, Peter. Mark from Manchester. I just hear one of your guests say that it was disgraceful what Lucy Conley says. What's he saying? What Ricky Jones says wasn't disgraceful. There's two-tier justice, two-tier thinking, two-tier everything since Labour got in power. Thanks, Pete. Great show.
Thanks, Mark. I mean, I'm absolutely clear that neither Ricky Jones nor Lucy Conley should have said what they said. One of them's in prison, one of them isn't, which I think proves to some degree, anyway, Mark's point. Let's hear from Dave.
Good morning, Peter. If you recall, before the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, there's a certain guy called Biden, you might remember him. He said it depends on how far Russia goes. That gave the green light to Russia to invade. So I can see a little bit where John is coming from. Now, I served in submarine service throughout the 70s in the Cold War, and it was always against the Russians. Nobody else. The Russians. Good show, mate, as usual.
Thanks, Dave. Much appreciated. Always good to hear from you. Kelvin's been in touch.
Good morning, Peter. Good show, anyway. There is one way of ending this war between Russia and Ukraine. I mean, Trump should have done it yesterday. He should have got Zelensky over and then put them both in a boxing ring and then fight it out that way. Winner takes all. That'd save all our lives. Let the leaders have a fight instead of putting soldiers out there. Makes more bloody sense. So yeah, that's what he should have done. Put them both in the ring and we could all have a bet on it as well, couldn't we? Anyway, that's my thought for the day. Probably a silly one, but never mind. Bye.
Thanks, Kelvin. And maybe a silly one, but at least it's a vaguely amusing one, certainly in the very, very serious thoughts that things are happening at the moment. I don't think sorting out diplomacy in the boxing ring is necessarily the best option, Kelvin, but you have brought a smile to my face nonetheless, so thank you to Kelvin. Let's hear from... Oh, sorry, was that James there that we heard from? Was that... No, that was Kelvin. That was Kelvin. Now we're going to hear one from James.
Hi, Peter. Yeah, sorting the old war out against Ukraine and Russia. Why don't we put two agreements on the table, one good with Russia, one good with Ukraine. Yeah, we get a boxing ring, put Putin and Zelensky in the boxing ring. They're both about the same height, a little bit of age difference. You know what I mean? Whoever wins gets to pick. I mean, that's a great idea.
So both, I was a bit confused because Tech Update put on my screen about Kelvin and James, and I thought only one referred to a boxing ring, but we have both Kelvin and James saying it should be sorted out in the boxing ring. Okay, let's not do that. I don't think that's the best way to sort out Ukraine. I think sensible discussion is, but maybe that's just a bit boring. I mean, flip a coin? No. These are serious matters, but nonetheless, listen, thanks for your messages. You can send them in, of course, 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk in just a second to Connor Tomlinson, who is from Courage Media, about a Labour-run council. This is Birmingham Council, which is, of course, having all sorts of problems. First of all, it's bankrupt. Second of all, they're having a big dispute over collecting the bins. This is about, they've ordered the removal of St George's and Union Jack flags, but they're too scared to take down Palestinian flags. I wonder why. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
To everybody, thank you very much to everybody who has been in touch, including the people saying that we were a bit nasty to John earlier. I don't think we were nasty to John at all. I think John had his point, made his point in regard to Russia. It was one that my panellists disagreed with on the debate desk. They're entitled to their opinion just as he's entitled to his. I did let him speak, and on a couple of occasions I did say, can we just let John make a point, which he did. And if John wants to ring in again, he is more than welcome to do so. He is welcome on the show, as are vast majority of other callers. If you ring in and abuse the people behind the scenes, we're not going to put you on, obviously, but if you have a reasonable point and we have time to put you on, we will. And we have plenty of people who want to get on between now and 12:30. If you're one of them, you're very, very welcome to call, maybe even in support of John. If you want to do that, you're more than welcome. 0344 499 1000. But I want to talk now about a Birmingham council. This is a very, very strange story. This is a council that has ordered removal of St George's and Union Jack flags, but there are many, many Palestinian flags in the area, and they say they won't take those down without police protection. I wonder why. Connor Tomlinson is with us. He is a contributor at Courage Media. Connor, you're very welcome to the programme. Just talk us through what has actually happened here.
So, the council, wearing the thin veneer of health and safety concerns, have removed English and British flags from lampposts because they said that it might distract drivers and cause road accidents. They have a very low opinion of the people, Birmingham residents' ability to focus on the road.
Well, exactly, and there have been many, many hundreds, probably thousands of flags up in Northern Ireland, both Union flags, sometimes Ulster flags, Irish flags, Palestinian flags, Israeli flags, for my entire lifetime, and to the best of my knowledge in my 41 years, not a single one has caused a car accident.
Well, there's also been an abundance of Pakistani flags that have been around said lampposts as well in the last week. Birmingham lit up, I think it was the library, the same colours as the Pakistan flag, so that's quite the distraction and an eyesore, but apparently didn't cause an epidemic of traffic accidents. And the reason this has happened, Peter, is yes, as the Mail point out, the area is over 80% Muslim, but if you go to the ONS census map, which is also out of date and we need an emergency census because it was recorded before the Boris wave, but if you go to it, Sparkhill is less than 3% white British. So that means that actually the English and the British flags are not the flags of the people living in the area. They don't identify with those flags, so it's no wonder the council don't keep them up. Instead, the Palestinian flags and the Pakistani flags are flying out of ethno-religious solidarity with the people in those countries. So we shouldn't be surprised.
Do you think an emergency census is something that should happen?
Oh, absolutely. We should know exactly who the people are in this country, where they come from, what they believe, and what areas of the country have been subjected to mass demographic and cultural change, which the British host majority voted against in every election and referendum since 1974, and were ignored by our politicians. And this has happened particularly in areas of Birmingham, where now conversations about integration or assimilation or flying the British flag are impossible because no Brits actually live there. And so we shouldn't be shocked that they don't feel represented by a flag that isn't theirs.
I always wanted the American singer John Denver to help me fill out my census. Connor, tell us what you think about the Palestinian flags and the fact that they have said they're not going to take them down without police help and protection.
I'm not shocked, again, because as we know, when From the River to the Sea was broadcast on the Elizabeth Tower, housing Big Ben during the ceasefire vote at Parliament, there is always an undercurrent of sectarian violence that accompanies Palestinian protests, not just because the vast majority of the demonstrators know that Hamas controls the area, and also the Palestinian Authority, who have worked hand in glove with Hamas and terror supporters in Iran and Qatar for decades now, but because they know that the main demographic fodder for these protests, there are, of course, some sort of like third worldist, old school boomer leftists that go along, but it's because it is Muslims, and they know that
young people who go in those protests as well, young people who aren't Muslims.
There are a few. There are, of course, the Queers for Palestine Brigade who are chickens voting for KFC, but the vast majority, disproportionately, are Muslims, and that is because they have a sense of collective solidarity with the Ummah, fellow Muslims around the world. If you notice as well, when the target of said protests is Israel, they have a particular problem with Jews. Just read the various hadiths that are cited in the Hamas charters that says that Judgment Day will only come for Muslims when rocks and trees come alive with the spirit of Allah and call out where the Jews are hiding so that Muslims can come and kill them. So this is a particularly galvanizing issue, and so if the council were to remove the flags, I don't think they're inclined to remove the flags anyway, because the local area, bear in mind, is run by Tahir Ali, the Pakistani Labour MP, who was lobbying for...
Well, listen, we're going to be careful what we say about him, certainly. We know his views. His views are on the record. Whether the area is actually run by him or not, I think is...
He is the local MP for Sparkhill.
Yeah, but you wouldn't say that Islington is run by Keir Starmer. I want to ask you about 60 people to be prosecuted for showing support for Palestine Action as well. We're just touching on this particular matter. The Metropolitan Police says that people will actually be prosecuted for showing support for this prescribed terrorist group Palestine Action. We know that over 500 were arrested last weekend, and very, very few of them, proportionately, we're talking about 10% of them here will be actually prosecuted. Do you think they should all be prosecuted? What do you think should happen?
Well, the problem is you're playing whack-a-mole. Look, I just don't think you should be supporting Hamas or Palestine, frankly, on the streets. I would rather the entire Middle Eastern debate weren't in this country and we hadn't imported lots of people.
I mean, people are entitled to free speech, Connor, aren't they? They're entitled to say...
No, I don't...
Well, they are. They're entitled to say they support the Palestinian cause.
No, honestly, Peter, I really don't care. I'm not for the free speech of people that are insistent on supporting a state who, if you imported all of their inhabitants here, they would happily cut my head off and put my wife in a bin bag. Don't care, not going to support them. But I do think this is far too late.
You may not care, Connor.
I don't, Peter. I don't care. I really don't care.
That's fine. But the point is there's free speech in this country. I'm not saying for a second
There's not free speech in this country, though. This is the point. There's
free speech within the law in this country.
Okay,
and my
the
point,
law doesn't
Conor, let me
support free
speak just for a second. We're talking about free speech. Let me speak here for a second. My point is that I don't support Hamas for a second. In fact, I've been one of the most vociferous people against them. I don't support the Palestinian cause personally. I do believe in a two-state solution. My point is that if people want to protest peacefully about whatever it is they want to protest about, I may have absolutely no interest or knowledge of what's happening in Azerbaijan, for example, but if people want to stage a protest in regard to that, they're entitled to do so within the law within this country.
Okay, as far as this particular group goes, given that they damaged RAF aircraft to the tune of millions and they're now being prescribed as a terrorist group, the government obviously being dragged kicking and screaming to doing so, if they want to associate their name with said prescribed terrorist group, they should expect to be arrested.
Completely agree.
On the broader point, I'm really not fussed, and this should have happened ages ago. This should have happened when Palestinian protesters were occupying Westminster every weekend and Wednesday, shooting fireworks at police horses and defacing our war memorials. This should have happened over 2 years ago. About 2 years ago now. So I'm not at all sympathetic to a bunch of people who care more about a rogue terror state halfway around the world than the severe crises that are facing this country and bringing it to the brink of civil unrest.
Speaking of crises embracing this country, Birmingham City Council, one might argue that they should be thinking about their own bankruptcy, the fact that they can't run a council, the fact that they don't have any money, and the fact that they're not collecting the bins. This is something that I believe Birmingham City Council should be involved with, and let the flags fly wherever they fly.
Well, I'm not fun with the flags flying wherever they fly. I think it should just be Britain and England. But the issue you get is when you have a heterogeneous population, or rather a homogenous population that isn't the English or British population, questions of identity take precedent over sort of policy concerns like economics or national defence. Instead, you have, in a sort of tribal fashion, ethnic and religious subgroups petitioning local or national government for their share of resources. It's a bit like in the third world when a tribal chieftain gets a load of money and the first thing he does is build a road to his dad's house, right?
Yeah.
This is all that's happened with the Birmingham interpretation of the Equality Act, is various sectarian groups are going, I want this money, and then they drain the pot, and so actual services that benefit everyone in the area can no longer be run, and they're essentially held hostage by bin men who understandably are protesting the fact that their salaries are going to be cut because of this equality grift. So I think you just need to essentially stop having these sectarian enclaves, and we won't have the conditions of the third world being recreated in the first world.
Conor, I'm sure you have an opinion on Councillor Ricky Jones as well. This is the councillor who, well, let's just have a look at exactly what he said on the 7th of August last year.
We've got children and women using those trains, destroying the summer relatives. They are disgusting, nasty bastards, and we need to cut all their throats and get rid of them all.
Well, Councillor Jones has been cleared by a jury. Conor, what do you make of that?
Well, it's very typical of the two-tier justice that happens in this country, and I know people will go, well, it wasn't a judge ruling on it. Okay, I'm sorry, but because of the ideological fever pitch that our country has reached, also the sort of sectarianism that's happened along ethnic, religious, and even gendered lines, unfortunately, because we don't know the composition of the jury, we don't know whether they judged blindly, without fair or favour, or out of some ideological, ethnic, or collective bargaining line.
I mean, you can make the same argument about people who were acquitted for taking part in the riots, couldn't you? You could say that if they were acquitted for that, well, we don't actually know why that happened. We don't know what was going through the minds of the juries at the time.
Okay, the people that were acquitted for the riots, who pled not guilty, themselves had not made comparable calls for violence that Ricky Jones had. That call for
I'm
violence...
not saying they were. I'm saying that we're talking about jury trials and the principle of jury trials.
Yeah, but the principle for jury trials should be to evaluate the argument on their merits.
I totally agree with you, but what I'm also saying is you don't know what was going through their mind at the time. We don't know the ethnic makeup, and that's a fair comment. It's perfectly fair to make that comment, but also we just don't know.
Okay, I would say that anyone who is not operating under anything except the principles of fair justice would have convicted him for a call for violence, because it would have fallen afoul of the incitement to violence standards of the American First Amendment, and that is the most robust free speech protections in the Western world. So I think this is an absurd ruling, and I think, yet again, if you are standing with the Stand Up to Racism Socialist Worker Party renter mob who receive state funding via various unions, you can apparently get off scot-free for saying things far worse than the likes of Peter Lynch, who was protesting peacefully outside an asylum hotel, wasn't participating in any violence, and is now dead because he for whatever reason, seems to have hung himself in prison. So I think these are just... It sets a standard that the justice system cannot sustain if they want to retain the waning legitimacy among the British public, who are more likely to abide by the laws than actual criminals. If they want to sustain that and sustain that legitimacy, they can't keep doing this.
Conor, always good to talk to you. Conor Tomlinson there, who is a contributor at Courage Media. I want to play a voice note from Nick, who has sent this in.
Good morning, Peter. Nick from Loughborough. I'm getting really fed up now about the Ukrainian issue, and I think now it's finally time we just pull out and let him get on with it. I don't think there's any circumstances whereby Russia would attempt to invade another NATO country. I think that's for the birds. It's taken them 3.5 years not to take Ukraine, and I think the country is remarkably corrupt. And if and when Putin does take over Ukraine, you'll see Zelensky get in his helicopter with suitcases full of money like they always do. Have a good day, Peter.
Nick, thanks for your thoughts. Always sensible and interesting when I hear from you, Nick. I mean, Zelensky, yeah, I know what you mean. I'm not defending Zelensky for a second. I think, I don't buy into this mainstream media narrative that Zelensky is Jesus and, an absolutely amazing person who cannot be criticised at all. In fairness to him, he stayed in Ukraine. He was offered asylum in other places. In fairness, he stayed there and he has fought for his people. But listen, I just think that we need to welcome the fact that Putin is talking. I know that's perhaps a simplistic thing. Maybe that is something, maybe I'm naive, but talking is better than not talking, even if it doesn't lead anywhere. It's, vacuums are not good when it comes to peace talks. Thanks also to Matthew, who says, don't worry, Peter, your John Denver gag with Conor may have been lost on Conor, but I laughed out loud. That is good, Matthew. I'm glad. Always good to have some really rubbish humour on the show. We're going to be talking in a second to you. We are also going to be talking a little bit later about the police chief who says there's no point in arresting shoplifters. What do you think about that? Should shoplifters be arrested, or is the justice system and the policing system so ridiculous that actually they're going to be let off anyway? Lots of people getting in touch about Conor. Someone says Conor speaks for the majority of British people. And H says your pious, wishy-washy liberalism is almost as damaging as a behaviour of the far left. I agree with Conor. Pious, wishy-washy liberalism? Really? Me? What? I don't think it's pious, I don't think it's wishy-washy, and I don't think it's liberalism. But aside from that, H, you're entitled to your opinion, even though I think it's wrong. Thank you to Mary, who says, morning Peter, I'm aware that the cost of yet more funding for the Ukraine war will be another enormous cost to our economy. However, is it more beneficial to the country that we spend our money in Ukraine, or that we spend it on the people who come across in the boats and demand that we support them with housing, food, healthcare, spending money and many other perks? Which of these two scenarios do you think will in future be a benefit to our country? Many thanks for all the issues which you raise on our behalf. Kindest regards, Mary. Mary, thanks for that. I appreciate that. Lots to discuss. We'll hear from you in just a second. If you want to get your call in, now's the time. Use the break. Pick up the phone. Kieran's on the phone calls today. You're on the line. You can have a chat with him. You make your point and we'll ring you back before the end of the show and make sure you get your voice heard. 0344 499 1000.
we're not actually in recession, not a major one. We're not going forward. Nothing's getting better. Nothing's getting sort of drastically worse. It's just slowly worse. That's what's sort of very painful about all of this. There's all sorts of potential for Britain to be a major military power or a major diplomatic power if it wants to be. As much as anything else, it just seems to be that our political class has decided to stand still and wring its hands. And that's ultimately what is so frustrating. We're not yet in free fall. It could be averted, the crisis that's coming.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to everybody who has been in touch. I've just been looking at Twitter there over the break, and Angela sent a good one and says, I agree with your caller Nick regarding Russia and Ukraine. Will the suitcase be filled with our tax money? She says with a laughing emoji. Birmingham Council as well has come in for some criticism from Rob, who sent me a voice note. You can send this in via WhatsApp 0344 499 1000. This is what Rob thinks.
Good morning, Peter. It's Robin Starbridge here, mate, just south of Birmingham. Peter, all I can say on the council removing the British flag and the English flag is that they're racist, mate. That's it. They're full-on racists. They call us racist. So you know what? It's time to throw a bit of it back at it. They're racist. Birmingham City Council, you're racist. Thank you, mate. Bye-bye.
Well, thank you, Rob. And it's a really interesting one. I mean, you've got to ask the question, why do they want to remove the flag of this country? Look, I come from Northern Ireland. I've seen loads of times where flags have been used as a weapon, where they've been used to try to mark out territory, to intimidate people. I have a kind of weird relationship with the flag of this country because I feel that I'm really a really patriotic British person. You may call me Irish. I don't. I'm from Northern Ireland, and the Belfast Agreement of 1998 allows me to call myself either British or Irish. I have a British passport. I've lived, half my life in England as well. So I'm British, and I'm very clear about that, and the Union flag is my flag. Do I feel the need to put it outside my house or to, mark out an area? No, but if people want to fly it, it's the flag of this country and should be flown, and that's fine by me. Thank you as well to Sam in Barnsley, who says, wow, Connor for Home Secretary, well said, good interview. Barbara, who's 77 and in London, says, really interesting this morning. Thank you very much. I was very impressed with Connor Tomlinson, who was your guest. He certainly spoke for me today. I think he said everything that the people who are indigenous to England and Britain would agree with. Well, thank you, Barbara. Appreciate that. Plenty coming in as well on regard to Ukraine. Tony in Southampton has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Tony, very good to talk to you. You're on the air. What would you like to say?
Well, what I'd like to say is that people need to remember that Putin went into Kiev with the intention of taking Ukraine in 2 weeks, and then as a platform to go back and rebuild parts of the Soviet Union. So it wasn't, you need to accept that he wants to rebuild the Soviet Union. He's just been slowed down drastically by Ukraine, and we need to thank them. But there's also maps. There's a Red Atlas where they translated the whole of the UK maps into Russian. And when you get a map and it's got your house name translated into Russian, that wakes you up a bit. He was not going to stop with Ukraine, and just to simply say, "Oh, we'll sacrifice Ukraine," and that will be.
I'm not saying, Tony, we should necessarily sacrifice Ukraine, but I mean that he wouldn't stop there. He hasn't been that successful, though, has he? He's taken a fifth of Ukraine, and what I worry about, and what a lot of people say, and a sort of mainstream view really, is that if he takes Ukraine, he's coming for us next, and I just don't think that's the case.
I don't think he was coming for us next, but if he did win Latvia and other, Estonia, etc., he might have got the greed to carry on. But, they clearly, he hadn't quite bargained on Ukraine fighting with silly little drones and the fight in the local people. But I mean, that's why we have to thank Ukrainian people for the effort they've put in. But I want this to end. I want, the money savings. I want the life savings. Everything.
Yeah.
But you do not you can't just throw in the towel and expect no consequences.
Yeah.
And that's what I sort of, I can see.
Well, that's what you caution, Tony, clearly.
Yeah, so President Trump, I mean, he's really after the financial savings, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But my caution is that if you just sort of, the people who will say, oh, just let them get on with it, I don't agree with that in the slightest.
Okay. Tony, listen, thanks for your thoughts. Appreciate it. Emma's in York and has some thoughts on this as well. Emma, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Peter, I think you're really brilliant. I just think you're very measured, calm.
Very kind. Thanks,
so
Emma.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think listening to your two previous panelists that you had on, who are obviously very anti-Russian.
Yes.
In my opinion, we have to keep the people in our mind and not politics. Mm-hmm. And it's about diplomacy, not dogma. And that is what stops wars and, in fact, stops them starting in the first place. So, in my opinion, we're doing the same thing we did in COVID, where if you think other than the mainstream narrative, you're called a COVID denier or climate denier. It's the same thing here. So you never really hear the measured background to this situation. Russia have pretty much gone in and stayed in the West because the West for the last decade, the Donbass area, have been under attack from Ukrainian forces, where tens of thousands of people have been killed. They banned the Russian language, banned the main religion, Russian Orthodox Church. They decriminalized discrimination against ethnic Russian Ukrainians. And that is why if the whole agreement is to give Putin, Donetsk, etc., that is a win-win, because the people are pro-Russian. They all voted for Russian parties in 2012. Before Ukraine banned those Russian
There's a lot in that, Emma, and I totally understand where you're coming from on that. I just wonder, the principle is, of course, that whilst these people may want to be part of Russia and maybe a referendum should be held, maybe that could be part of the ceasefire agreement, a peace agreement, we don't know. But what we do know as well is that Putin invaded sovereign territory and has perpetrated a horrible bloody war as well. That's also happened, hasn't it?
I know that, but there's a reason that Ukraine have got a multi-billion-pound ski resort being built in the east next year. It's because Putin is focusing his time on the areas that want to be freed from Ukrainian oppression. You never hear that side. And the people you had on your panel were talking about, oh, Putin this and Russia bad. Russia have had elections. Ukrainian people, much that I've known, are asking for elections, which are being ignored.
Although they can't have it in a war, but I mean, you can't.
I think you can. Personally, there's most of the areas are free and peaceful. There's no war happening.
You can't say that Putin was democratically elected, though, can you?
Who knows? Who knows?
Well, those elections weren't free and fair, Emma. I just don't think they were.
That in many European elections. I think we just need to put egos aside. I think we need to focus on stopping people being murdered. And this is not just about Ukraine. This is affecting the whole world. And the sooner that we bring peace is better for everybody. Ukrainian people first and foremost. So they're happy that they're pro-Russian Ukrainians. They've been killed over 10 years. There's the Valley of Angels Memorial in Donetsk. This is not... what annoys me is Ukraine is being portrayed as this amazing holy grail country. It's been voted one of the most corrupt countries
you're absolutely right about the corruption that is certainly in Ukraine, and I just think you're right, Emma, in that we need a degree of nuance here that I think is missing, and it's very lazy simply to say that Zelensky is a wonderful, marvellous person, and I do think that is something that we need to be really careful about. Emma, thank you for your call. That was Emma in York there. Appreciate that. And if you want to get your call in, you can do the same thing, or a voice note. You can also send that to me on 0344 499 1000. I'm going to talk to Mike Neville, the retired Scotland Yard detective, in a minute about this ludicrous story that the national lead for shoplifting at the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners said it was madness how many times thieves had to be arrested before ending up in bars, and essentially said there's no point in arresting them if the courts keep setting them free. So we're going to talk about that and get your voice on the air as well. 0344 499 1000.
how much, ladies and gentlemen, are fish and chips where you come from? We'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish, chips and peas, £7.50. It's the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips in Leeds, it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us curry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12 and 60 pence. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks. Couple of weeks
How
ago.
much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell with you for the next half an hour. There's loads to talk about. We've got Mike Neville in the studio, the retired Scotland Yard detective, talking about the fact that a policing chief says there's no point arresting shoplifters when courts set them free. So are the courts to blame? Are the police to blame? Perhaps even the shoplifters are to blame. Let's call them what they are, scumbags. I did that interview with Rob Davies, the shop owner who put that message on his cabinets about a week and a half ago. Lots to discuss. I want to get your views on Trump and Putin and Zelensky as well. 0344 499 1000. You can send me a voice note on that number too. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a voice note, as I say, send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring on the main number 0344 499 1000. Plenty to talk about in the next half an hour here on Talk. And just speaking of voice notes, let's hear one from John in Texas.
Good morning, Peter. This is John from Texas. When I see these governments that worry more about the anger from minorities and such in their countries, I'm reminded of the quote from the famous English poet John Dryden, "Beware the fury of a patient man." So the majority, the silent majority who have been very patient, their patience will only last so long. Great show. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Very thoughtful voice note, and very early in the morning for you as well. It's just gone 6 o'clock in the morning in Texas there. So GMT -5 in Texas, I think. Maybe even -6, I'm not quite sure. But listen, thank you for that. Thanks also to Ian, who says Connor does not speak to the majority of Britain, as your caller claims. His reactionary views and his bending of the truth to fit it annoyed me. Incidentally, the majority of pro-Palestine protesters abhor the 7th of October as much as they abhor Israel's genocide, says Ian. Well, it's factually not genocide, Ian, and let's hope you're right about those pro-Palestinian protesters. Sarah in Belfast says, really grateful to hear Emma, your caller, articulate a balanced view on the war in Ukraine. Supporting Zelensky is emphatically not in the UK's interest and never was, in my honest opinion, says Sarah. Well, thank you for that. I want to talk now about a fascinating story in the Telegraph. This is Katie Bourne, who's the national lead for shoplifting of the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners, who says it's madness how many times thieves had to be arrested before ending up behind bars. She says if prison is not an option, and I think it should be, but at the moment it clearly isn't as there are no places, then we've got to find credible alternatives. People have got to show that they're going to get caught and there's a meaningful deterrent when they do. There's no point in arresting shoplifters if there is no effective deterrent. This is, of course, after the huge backlash, after I spoke to Rob Davies in North Wales, the shopkeeper who sparked a huge backlash when he was spoken to by police. A police officer and a police community support officer came by telling him that he shouldn't have put up a sign calling shoplifters scumbags because it was offensive. So is there any point arresting shoplifters if the courts keep setting them free and they're not prevented by being in prison from carrying out further crimes? Let's discuss it with Mike Neville, former Scotland Yard detective. Mike, what do you make of what Katie Bourne has said?
Well, Katie Bourne, the Police and Crime Commissioner for Sussex, I think she's right in the sense that something has to be done. And what these prolific criminals need is, when I used to speak to criminals, informants who would give me information, I would chat to them about their lifestyle. And the only thing that criminals fear is being locked up. They need, if you don't put them in prison, they see community sentences as a joke, they see these tags as a joke. And so we need to, we've built those Nightingale hospitals so fast when we had COVID. Why can't we build some sort of Nightingale prisons? These hyper-prolific criminals, like the thieves, who in the Telegraph, there's a woman who's been 170 convictions. She wouldn't need much security, really, a barbed wire fence and a hut to put them in, because all the alternatives simply don't work. So, for example, I looked at tags. Tags are mentioned in there. I did an FOI, Freedom of Information Act request. It turns out that only 20% of tag breaches, where the tag goes off and says this person's in the wrong place or out at the wrong time, have anything done about them. And that doesn't mean you're arrested. It might mean somebody coming around saying, oh, your tag's gone off, don't do it again. So 80% of the time, the criminals just do what they want. There was also 1 million hours of unpaid work not done.
Yeah.
So all these community centres, we've been told by experts for years that this is the future, these community sentences, tags and all this sort of nonsense. They don't work. When you get to the point of having 170 convictions, that I would estimate the woman's probably done 10,000 thefts. If you look at every day of her life for the last 30 years, 10,000 times.
And how many you're likely to be convicted of versus how many you do. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So they need to be locked up, and this is a failing of, when you say who's to blame, yes, the thieves are to blame, but it's the politicians. You had politicians who simply not invested in prisons and suddenly noticed that there's 99% of the prisons are full. You would think they notice at 90, wouldn't you, really? But 99, the alarm goes off. And also you have people like Theresa May, when Home Secretary, they reduced shoplifting under £200 to sort of a minor offence, have what equivalent of a traffic ticket and on your way. The thieves are not stupid. They'll just steal 5 times 199 quid's worth of goods. So I think the politicians really are the ones to blame for all this.
And I wonder as well, I mean, we were hearing the other day from Police and Crime Commissioner, we talked about this, who said that shoplifters should be, that the public should actually intervene. I mean, that's utterly ridiculous as well. But the fact is that many security guards are told, don't tackle this person to the ground, don't grab them, because they might have a knife as well. And shoplifting is completely out of control in this country. It needs to be a priority for these, for the police, doesn't it?
Well, what it does, you see, is that, as we've discussed before, you see an image of a shoplifter and invariably they're depositing something in their jacket and sneaking out. But in reality, what they're doing now is putting 5 bottles of whiskey in a trolley or a basket and just simply walking out of the store. And what you have in London, for example, is a nearly 40% increase in commercial robbery, so violence, theft with violence in shops. And this often occurs because these people feel so entitled to steal that when somebody actually does intervene, they become violent. And so this advice by that Matthew Barber, who's the PCC for Thames Valley, he's just putting people on offer because who knows what that shoplifter's got. So a lot of some of these people are very organised criminals, but some of them are just drug addicts who are desperate. So they've got needles, they've got knives. You just don't know what you're getting into. So what it needs is a clampdown, but what we need is the prison places to have that clampdown.
Yes, indeed. I should say as well that if you have experience of this, if you've seen shoplifters who are in action, what do you think about what the police should do? Are they acting in the right way? 0344 499 1000. And Tech Update has checked what time it is in Texas as well for John. It is 9 minutes past 6, so good morning, John, and a very good afternoon to the vast majority of our viewers and listeners. Mike, you talked there about tags, and one thing that I remember being discussed when I was at the Ministry of Justice as a special advisor just for 6 months was tags that monitor whether prisoners on parole are drinking, for example. It can monitor alcohol, and that's all fine. They're fine as a principle, aren't they? All these things are fine as a principle, being out on licence and so on. But the fact is, you're not monitoring these people all the time. The the staff are not there to do it. And in theory, these things would work, but actually in practice, the personnel aren't there to do it.
That's absolutely right, because what they do, they create this law or they create this device, a tag, and then they say to the police, it's down to you. Well, there isn't enough police officers to deal with burglary, robbery, theft, cybercrime and all the rest of it, so that then they haven't got enough time to go around to somebody's house and check up. So if you're going to put lots of tags, then they almost need like a tag checking agency whose sole job is to make sure that people are obeying the rules, because if people on tags know that 95% of the time, if you breach it, you drink, you have drugs, or you go out, or you wear it in your own
take that risk, won't you?
You wouldn't take the risk if you knew there's a 95% chance of getting arrested.
Sure.
So there's got to be a consequence, but at the moment there's no consequence to these things. So, and governments love things. Oh, we bought all these tags. We bought loads of CCTV. We bought a facial recognition machine. All these things. But where's the people who are going to ensure that that delivers?
And this is the point, not just about criminal justice, but about politics more generally. Politicians love saying, here's a new law, here's a new initiative, here's a new idea, here's something we're doing. When actually what we need to happen, especially when it comes to things like shoplifting, which is a deeply unsexy crime, there's not a huge amount that you can really do about it apart from enforce the law. And when was the last time you had a politician saying, do you know what we're going to do is nothing. We're going to do nothing. No new initiatives. What we're going to do is enforce the law that's there. We're going to give the police the support in order to do it. We're going to give them funding, and we want them to say, these are the laws. We don't need new laws. Just enforce the ones that are there already.
Well, if you look in you go to a shop in London, you find me a shop anywhere really that hasn't got CCTV.
Yeah.
So nearly every one of these crimes is captured on CCTV. So how is it that the police are only solving 1% of thefts? Because no one's thought of how do we get the images of that footage? How do we identify them? How do we link all these people? So we're not just arresting somebody for one crime, we were going to arrest them for 50 crimes and then they'll go to jail. But that was never thought out. So as you say, if they simply said, let's use the equipment we already have, let's use all the images that we've already captured of all these shoplifters and put them in prison, then the problem might reduce. But all they do is new initiatives, new ideas, buy new things, and the result is the same old nonsense where thieves are just robbing us blind and making a mockery of the system.
I wonder what you make of what Ben in Belfast is saying here. Career criminals don't fear being locked up. The rewards of crime outweigh the risk of prison, and the problem with Nightingale hospitals was that there weren't enough nurses to staff them, so they were very underused. Same problem with the idea of Nightingale prisons. There aren't enough prison officers, and drug addicts aren't deterred by the threat of prison. The need for drugs overtakes everything else. What do you make of that?
What I know about that, though, is having police communities around here, very working class communities, council estates, they want rid of the drug addict. The drug addict's thieving, causing misery every day. So locking them up gives everybody else a respite. Whether it has any impact on the drug addict, to me, is of no consequence. What the people who matter are the innocent people who just want to work and live their lives out. So you remove them. You cannot steal if you're in prison. You can steal from each other, but you can't steal from the local shop. You can't mug the little old lady. So and having spoken to criminals, I just know that that's what they fear. Because prison is, no matter how much you portray it as having TVs and all this sort of stuff, you can't do
it is a deprivation of liberty.
Something needs to be done, and we've been told that prison doesn't work for about 60 years, and crime has gone through the roof in the last 60 years. So let's forget all these experts and let's listen to what criminals tell us and build some prisons and train some more officers. Simple as that.
Elisa in Chelmsford has been in touch and says, good afternoon, Peter. Having served 25 years as a London copper, I can tell you that in my day, shoplifters were always nicked and usually banged up. The broken window theory must be revived. That's the idea that if you break a window, there has to be a consequence for it. Even the smallest crime must be dealt with and prosecuted. Elisa continues, law and order must be restored, but as Mike Neville said, it's the politicians who have let us all down. More prisons are urgently required. Mike?
Absolutely, because this is what they understand. And what happens, though, I think we're reaching a tipping point in society where everybody's saying, well, why don't I shoplift? Because I was in a shop the other day and there was one person employed to do everything. And I got some goods. I went to the front, no one at the car. I had to pay on one of these self-service things. I could have simply walked out of the shop.
A load of people don't pay, or they don't pay for everything in the self-service. So they'll get some, I've seen it myself, they'll get maybe some, a couple of steaks or something that's quite expensive. They'll pay for, the packet of fruit pasties, but they won't, and then they'll walk out with the steak.
But what it does though is that if everybody why don't I start stealing if everybody else is stealing? So, and society really runs on everybody agreeing to abide by the rules. There's no real enforcement, and we're reaching that point where people see it. And I keep giving this example: as two old ladies work in the post office and shop near where I live in the Midlands, and every day they say people come in there stealing, nicking things out of there, and they say, look, if you touch us, we've got a needle, or we know where you live. And they're working 10 hours to earn the same amount of money as those people are nicking and stealing out the shop. And you get to the point of thinking, why am I doing this?
Well, you feel like a mug for obeying the law.
Yes, absolutely.
Mike, great to talk to you as always. Mike Neville there, the former Scotland Yard detective. Thank you to him. I just want to hear a voice note before the break from Mark.
Hi, Peter. Heard something really quite interesting that actually makes a lot of sense. How would a civil war erupt? And this was from a chap called Charlie Veach. Has a YouTube thing. Anyway, he was talking about what could happen, a potential eruption of a civil war. You get a load of Islamists shipping, say, 70, 80, 100,000, maybe even migrants, something like that, to somewhere like Bradford. And then they just barricade the town. There's nothing the police are going to be able to do. The army would struggle to do anything about it. And what would happen with this government? What do you think would happen, given how they're now treating, recognising Palestine? Yeah, they just appease them. They say, well, why don't we devolve Bradford? That's how it might well happen, Peter. Just food for thought, mate. Cheers.
Mark, what a grim prospect. Let's hope that doesn't happen, and we're hopefully a long way away from civil war. If you're going to protest, especially if you're going to protest at all, make it peaceful. There are still some people who are protesting, of course, about migrant hotels and so on. We'll take your calls, and we will make sure that your voice is heard after the break here on Talk. Stay with us.
We're not actually in recession, not a major one. We're not going forward. Nothing's getting better. Nothing's getting sort of drastically worse. It's just slowly worse. That's what's sort of very painful about all of this. There's all sorts of potential for Britain to be a major military power or a major diplomatic power if it wants to be. As much as anything else, it just seems to be that our political class has decided to stand still and wring its hands. And that's ultimately what is so frustrating. We're not yet in free fall. It could be averted, the crisis that's coming.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody who has been in touch. Lots and lots of messages today, so I really appreciate them. Thank you to Sandy Dunn. He says 4 points that are being edited out by the West media. 1, isn't the case that Putin's invasion of the east side of Ukraine and the Crimea Peninsula is to secure access to the Black Sea for the Russian Navy, which makes sense given the West's threat to Russia's border via Ukraine. 2, take a look at the size of Russia on a proportional map. It is simply massive. Putin does not need Ukraine per se. 3, Putin is in his 70s and suffering from cancer. He won't be around long enough to gain from his empire building. 4, Russia's population is only twice the UK, so not big enough to conquer and keep Europe, even if it was Putin's plan. Well, Sandy, we have all sorts of views on this station, including from Brian, who says it's clear that there are people and groups that want no talking. I might like to add comparisons to World War II are stupid. There's an element that no one is considering. It's nuclear weapons. This is a different time. Natalia says, hi Peter, just a quick reminder that you do have a Russian, originally, a listener and viewer, but then she pretty much agrees with your stance on that particular conflict, so we'll just carry on sipping her English tea. Good show. And Ken, on what has happened with Councillor Ricky Jones, says if you want to threaten violence, remember, don't do it on social media, do it on the streets in front of fanatical supporters. Remember to take trial by jury and make sure it's in a location where the majority of the jurors are of a certain persuasion. Well, we don't know who was on the jury, we don't know what their persuasion is, and we don't know what was running through their minds, but it's fine to comment on that, of course. Horace says 3 questions for Peter and guest. Do both sides of a conflict engage in propaganda? Yes. Does NATO, Ukraine and NATO engage in propaganda? Yes. What would Ukraine and NATO propaganda look like, says Horace. Well, Horace, I think a wise reminder to keep our critical faculties, our critical thinking intact. Let's talk to Fee in Berkshire. Fee, I understand you've taken in a Ukrainian refugee yourself.
Yes, good morning, Peter.
Morning, hi.
Thanks for having me on the show. Yes, I've housed a Ukrainian now for nearly 3 years. Actually, it's this month she arrived 3 years ago in September. I agree that the war needs to end. We all agree that, you know, we can't stand this anymore. And I agree with there needs to be some peace talks, but it has to be a fair compromise or an agreement with Zelensky involved as well. Now, my concern is with the time that the war's gone on, there is an extension process that the current Ukrainians in our community and in the UK can apply for, but they live in uncertainty at the moment because my guest is in her 30s, but there are families here with children and they've integrated fully. The parents have got jobs, the mothers have got jobs, they all contribute to the economy, but they fear for the future of their children in understanding whether they should go to university or not. It's a bit like they're in limbo.
Well, of course, and they don't know, could they get, I mean, I remember speaking to someone who had there's a young woman who had a Ukrainian girl in her school. I remember speaking to the mother and she kept saying, oh, you won't see me after the summer, we're going back to Ukraine. And then for, I think, 3 years in a row, she went back to the school because they felt they couldn't go back to Ukraine, and they are in limbo. What do you think should happen to these Ukrainian refugees in our country, Fee?
I guess it depends on what the negotiations come out with. I think if they have proven themselves to integrate and they're working, then they should have an option to apply for permanent residency. If not, they obviously, if they want to go back, then by all means. My guest has gone back to her hometown a few times to see her family. She has lost relatives in the fighting, and when the war broke out, I started running a support group, a social group for them, and some of the stories I heard about what they saw at the time when the war started, no one wants to see.
Certainly.
So. Yeah, it's very difficult. It is a limbo situation.
Well, Fee, it certainly sounds as if you have done an awful lot for your guest and for all those people, and I think you're a shining example of how hospitable people in the UK can be, especially the people who are caught up in war. So thank you for all that you do. That's Fee in Berkshire there. Thanks for that call. Thanks also to everybody working on the show today. Cal Duffy has been the producer. Chris Jacobs set up the programme. Dave Rhodes has been Tech Up Dave, and indeed still is. He's been the technical operator. Kieran Galpin, the assistant producer. Naya Saravanchi and Kalila Bradley, the visual producers. And Ayub Alfaraz has been the video editor. Dean Spencer as well has been the weekend editor. Thank you very much indeed to all of them. I'm back tomorrow at 10 o'clock, between 10 and 1. Hope to have your company there. Russell Quirk back in the morning between 6 and 10. And then I will be here at 10 o'clock tomorrow. Hope to see you then. Have a great afternoon.
How much, ladies and gentlemen, are fish and chips where you come from? We'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish, chips and peas, £7.50. It's the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips, in Leeds it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us curry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12.60. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks ago.
How much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a... How much, ladies and gentlemen, are fish and chips where you come from? We'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish, chips and peas, £7.50. It's the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips, in Leeds it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us curry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.